Good morning. My name is Laurel, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the CA Infrastructure Management Global User Community Webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. To withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Mr. Michael Helder, you may begin.
Thanks, Laurel. Welcome, everyone, to the November Infrastructure Management Community Webcast. We have today one of our board members, Stuart Weenig, who will be presenting on his experiences so far with Infrastructure Management 2.0. But before we go to that, I'd just like to mention briefly a few things about CA World. Registration is opened. For all community members, you can get a $200 discount, and that's on top of the early bird discount, which will be there until February 1st. So a total of $400 discount if you register through the link on the welcome page of our community. So if you just go to MyCA, you go to the page for the Infrastructure Management Global User Community. On the first page, you will see at the top of the page the logo for CA World, and it includes text with a link, which you should use to register to get the discount. We'll be giving some more updates on CA World and the topics in the next few webcasts. If you have any suggestions, some feedback from previous CA World experiences, any questions, contact us, and we'll see what we can do to answer those and to get your feedback to the right people. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Stuart. Stuart, go ahead.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Like Michael said, I'm going to be presenting today on Infrastructure Manager 2.0, some of the things that I've learned just getting things set up here in my lab, as well as setting it up at a couple of one customer site. And so what I'm going to be going through today is really more just a crash course. It's not meant to be an end-all, be-all, everything you need to know, but really just the basics, what you need to know, some of the major paradigm shifts from previous products, be it eHealth, NetVoyan, whatever, and some of the things you're going to need to know in order to make sure you understand how to plan your infrastructure manager installation if you are going to be doing that. All right, so let's see how to figure out how to, there it is. Had to find the next button. Okay, so a couple of things what I'm going to be talking about. First of all, the prerequisites, everything you're going to need to know in order to actually get it installed, what operating system you're going to need, what hardware you're going to need, how the different pieces of the product actually fit together, what servers and everything are involved. Then I'm going to show you how you can download the product, which is actually a little bit unintuitive, just because it's not really treated on the support website the same as the rest of the products. And then I'll go through what I call the chain of configuration, which is really, for me, the important part, the drawing that I came up with to help me understand exactly what I need to know and where things need to go when I have a piece of configuration I need to change. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the prerequisites. As far as the software, Infrastructure Manager 2.0 runs on Red Hat Linux. Versions 5.5 and 5.6 has to be the 64-bit edition. Technically, anything later or earlier than those versions is not supported, although some users have had various levels of success getting it to run on Red Hat 6. But it's not officially supported. So if you install it on Red Hat 6 and then you call up support with a problem, they're probably going to say first thing, switch over to 5.5 or 5.6. There have been quite a few people who've gotten it installed on 5.5 and 5.6 without any problems. The more recent builds, which right now, as far as I can tell, there are 2 different builds available generally, and the more recent of those builds has a smaller install setup script, if you will, fewer number of steps to actually go through to get it set up. So if you are looking at getting this installed, I would go ahead and use the most recent version for that, and because obviously it's going to have more of the features built in. Some required libraries for Red Hat that you're probably going to need, although they might be built in, It just depends on which build of Red Hat you actually got installed. The glibc, the standard C libraries, unzip, VC, and sudo. If you are installing this on a different operating system, for example, CentOS, which CentOS is technically possible because it is a binary equivalent of Red Hat Linux, and some community members, Frank and myself, we've both been able to get it up and running on CentOS 6 with different levels of success. Depending on CentOS, again, which build you use, you may need these libraries for that as well. Most of these libraries actually, it's odd, but you don't actually need the libraries to run the product. You only need them to install the product. So after you get it installed, if there's some kind of security issue and you need to remove those, you can probably remove those, although I don't know if anybody's actually tried it. Okay, so let's talk about Infrastructure Manager 2.0 and CA Performance Center. So Infrastructure Manager 2.0 and CA Performance Center 2.0 came out together, and the reason they came out together is because Infrastructure Manager by itself doesn't have a web GUI. It doesn't have an administrative GUI. All it has is the engine. It does what it does. In order to actually administer the product and use the product and make any kind of configuration change, you're going to need to use CA Performance Center 2.0. Once you add in Infrastructure Manager to Performance Center, then you'll have an additional set of administrative pages where you can go in and you can configure everything that I'm going to talk about later on in this presentation as far as the configuration of Performance Center. So CA Performance Center 2.0 is a reimagining of NetQS Performance Center 6.1. So that's why they restarted the numbers at 2.0 to make it clear that this is a totally different product. It also means that the things that were once compatible with MPC are not necessarily compatible with CA Performance Center. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. First of all, if you're going from Performance Center, NetQS Performance Center 6.1 to CA Performance Center 2.0, there is no upgrade path. For one thing, NPC 6 runs on Windows and CA Performance Center runs on Linux. Plus, any custom reports that you may have had built in NetQS Performance Center are not going to be carried over into CA Performance Center. There's no upgrade path for those reports, mainly because the underlying infrastructure is radically different than it was in NPC. So any custom reports or any custom groupings that you have, all of the users that you may have added with the roles, all of that's going to need to be built from scratch with CA Performance Center 2.0. I'm not aware of any plans to migrate any data from the old Performance Center to the new Performance Center, and I don't think there are any plans. Okay, so that's CA Performance Center. Now, the thing is, when moving to CA Performance Center 2.0, you have to consider the other products that you may have. So you may have Reporter Analyzer, Super Agent, eHealth, or any of the other products that you may have tied into MPC. So up here on the screen, I've got listed the various different versions that you'll have to move to in order to connect into CA Performance Center 2.0. The thing is, if you go from NPC to CA Performance Center, then you're going to need to upgrade several things. First of all, Reporter Analyzer is not compatible with the new version of CA Performance Center, so you'll have to upgrade from Reporter Analyzer to the new version, which gets a new number and a new name. It's now called Network Flow Analysis 9.1. Which is generally available right now. As well, from 9.0 to 9.1, there is no upgrade path. So if you have a lot of historical data with Reporter Analyzer and you upgrade to Network Flow Analysis 9.1, you're going to lose all that historical data because there actually is no upgrade. It's only a setup. Now, I was talking to Anthony Urbano the other day, and he said that he is expecting to have the next release of NetFlow Analysis to have an upgrade path, so you can bring along all that historical data, all your CVIs, all your application mapping configuration, all your traps, all of that stuff can come over from your previous version of Report Analyzer up to what I expect would be something like 9.2. The other nice thing about the next version of Network Flow Analysis is that it is supposed to support both CA Performance Center 2.0 and NPC 6.1. So that means that where before, if you go from RA to NFA 9.1, you have to use CA Performance Center 2.0. NFA 9.1 is only compatible with CA Performance Center 2.0. With the next release, we're expecting to have support for both NPC and CAPC, and you'll be able to upgrade your historical data. As far as Super Agent 9.1 was compatible with NPC. In order to use CA Performance Center 2.0, you have to upgrade to 9.2, and at that point also gets a new name. It's called Application Delivery Analysis. ADA 9.2 also is one of those that straddles that also supports both NPC and CA Performance Center. So that one is actually available today. So if you needed to upgrade to resolve any kind of issue that you may be having with Super Agent, you can go ahead and do that without the need to upgrade Performance Center and everything else at the same time. NetVoyant 7.1, right now, as far as I know, there are no plans to move or to add NetVoyant as a data source in CA Performance Center. Kind of the whole point of Infrastructure Manager 2.0 is to be able to do everything that NetVoyant and eHealth and the other SNMP polling engines that we have to do the Infrastructure Manager. So that's kind of the point of Infrastructure Manager. Once again, NetVoyant, since there is no real upgrade path from NetVoyant 7.1 to IM 2.0, it doesn't really have it there. Can everybody hear me? I'm getting a message that not everybody can hear me. Michael, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, it's fine here, Stuart.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so that's great. So that's NetVoyant. Like I said, no upgrade path. eHealth. In order to add eHealth, there was a hotfix released for eHealth that will let you add eHealth to CA Performance Center 2.0. I'm not aware if that eHealth integration is also compatible with MPC 6.1, but I imagine it would be. So if you're moving over to Infrastructure Manager and you got Performance Center 2.0 uploaded or installed, then you'll need to move up to eHealth 6.3.07. UC Monitor 3.1 is with NPC, and UC Monitor 3.3 is with CA Performance Center, and the rest of the versions you can see here. Spectrum does require a hotfix, and if you're using TIM with a multi-port collector, you will need to upgrade to APM 9.1a. Okay, and again, at the end, we're going to be opening up questions. So if you got any questions, we can come back to these versions and talk about the different version compatibilities. The main thing I wanted to emphasize here is that if you do move to CA Performance Center 2.0, it does necessitate other things having to move up to the next version. And those other things, moving up to the next version, at least currently, especially for a reporter analyzer, they don't support the old NPC. So it's kind of not necessarily an all or nothing, but it's a mostly all or nothing kind of situation. The nice thing about it, however, is that you can, given your resources, you can go ahead and set up a purely parallel system. So if looking at implementing IM 2.0, you can get it up and running, have it do its SNMP polling in parallel with eHealth or NetVoyant, and you can upgrade application delivery analysis up to 9.2, Super Agent up to 9.2, and leave it on NPC 6.1, or you can do a brand new installation and put that on the CA Performance Center. Same thing with Reporter Analyzer. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about the deployment architecture. There's three main components to Infrastructure Manager itself: the data aggregator, data collectors, and data repository. So the data collectors down at the bottom of your screen, that's the main engine that does all of the SNMP polling, all of the collection. And if you talk to Oleg, or if you have listened to some of his webcasts, you'll see that he mentions a lot how he'd like to eventually have the data collectors do a lot more than just SNMP, but use other data collection mechanisms, WMI, NetFlow possibly, other different mechanisms to collect that data, which will be kind of cool. All those data collectors feed into one single data aggregator. Right now, the data aggregator does not support any kind of clustering system, so it is a single box. You can, depending on whatever technologies you have in-house, may be able to implement some type of a high availability situation. But as far as I know, there's no real clustering or high availability built into the data aggregator itself. There may be some add-on pieces that you can get to try and make that happen. The data repository is simply your database. That's where all of it is going to be stored. That does support clustering. If you look through the installation instructions on the data repository, there are options to set up clusters. It's a Vertica database basically that spans over, I think it's up to 3 different servers. And then all of that data, just like before, feeds up into CA Performance Center. CA Performance Center, since it has been rewritten, has taken into account some of the more modern browsers. So Firefox and Chrome are now also supported in addition to Internet Explorer. I do know there is some pretty heated debate on which version of Internet Explorer should be supported. So if you're interested in that, there's a fairly active message board post out on the message boards. So let's talk then a little bit about what hardware you're going to need to do these, to set all these up. So the way CA is presenting it, CA is basically envisioning 3 different sizes of deployments, either small, medium, or large. And it's 100,000 monitored items or elements if you're talking eHealth, or poll instances if you're talking NetVoyant. And then medium is 500,000, and then large is 1 million. So to go along with the small, medium, large, the table down at the bottom actually shows the amount of resources that you'll need to actually get these systems up and running. So for a small installation, which means 1 box for data repository, 1 data aggregator, 1 collector, and 1 performance center server, 100,000 monitor items, you're going to need 10 total cores, 40 gigs of RAM, and 350 gigs of hard drive space. On the other end of the scale, for the large one, 1 million monitored items, you're going to need about 100 cores, 216 gigs of RAM, and somewhere around 2.5 terabytes of hard drive space. So granted, this is a little bit larger, but one of the main reasons that, or one of the main driving forces behind Polaris was to make sure that Polaris could scale to some of the biggest possible environments out there. So giving this extra hardware allows infrastructure management to be able to handle all that scalability, right? Okay, so next. All right, so now we're going to look at how to go in and download it. Like I said, downloading the product is different than downloading every other product on the support website, mainly because the explanation I got was that CA wanted to be able to entitle everyone who currently owns a product inside the infrastructure management realm access to IM 2.0. So if you own Reporter Analyzer, or if you own NetVoyant, or eHealth, or any of these, then they wanted to have a way to be able to give those people who are entitled to those products access to Infrastructure Manager 2.0. So the way you do that is actually through what CA deems a solution. So from the MyCA page, when you log into MyCA, you should have a support tab, and if you mouse over that on the right-hand side, there should be an option to download solution. That download solution is going to take you to a page where you can go in and you can select your product. So since I'm entitled to NetVoyant in this case, what I did where it says select product is I typed in NetVoyant, picked it from the drop-down box, picked my release, and then in the select a component checkbox, it's a list of checkbox items there. If you scroll down, you'll see that it says IM Data Aggregator and CA Performance Center. So that's your 2 main pieces of Infrastructure Management 2.0 is the data aggregator, which also includes your collector and your data repository, and then CA Performance Center, which is your web GUI and your reporting for everything else. So make sure you've got those checked, and then when you hit the search button, you should get something back that looks like this. And you'll see we've got IM Data Aggregator listed there twice, 2 different versions, and CA Performance Center, 2 different versions. I do believe that the name of the published solution at the very top where it says Data Aggregator 1.0.3.20 is actually a typo. It should be 2.0.3.20. So that should be the most recent release. The 2 down at the bottom are the original GA release that were released back in August timeframe, and then in October there was an update release to address some of the issues that were found with the initial release. All right, so now what I want to talk about is what I call the chain of configurations. Well, infrastructure management has basically 2 modes or 2 phases of work when you're looking at polling, for example, a single device. Right? The first is inventory discovery, and the second is component discovery and polling. So inventory discovery, really the only thing that happens during inventory discovery is that the collector, the data collector, contacts the device or attempts to contact the device and attempts to obtain the minimum amount of information necessary in order to categorize the device, in order to figure out what kind of device it is. First of all, is it ICMP pingable? Is it SNMP pollable? Once we figure out that it is SNMP pollable, is it a server? Is it a switch? Is it a router? Is it a firewall? Whatever it is. And at that point, once we figure out what kind of device it is and we can classify it, then that's it for inventory discovery. Inventory discovery is completed at that point, and we move over to component discovery and polling. Right? And component discovery and polling is once we figured out that this device is a router, for example, then there is a configuration profile that tells us, well, for all of my routers, I want to gather information about CPU and interface statistics and Cisco backplane information and CBQoS and IPSLA and all the different things that go along with routers, right? So consequently, these two different modes have their own configuration profile, right? So first of all, we've got the discovery profile. The discovery profile is a list, basically, of the devices that infrastructure manager needs to collect on, needs to monitor. And we'll talk about the different ways that it can happen. So, like I said, inventory discovery goes through this list of devices to monitor, contacts the device, gets the minimum amount of information necessary to find out what kind of device it is so that it can be classified. And once that device is classified, we're going to put the device in one or more collections. Now, there are built-in collections, and you can make custom collections. But for most purposes, you'll probably find that the built-in collections are good enough. So, for example, some of the built-in collections are ICMP pingable devices, which is going to be all devices that can be reached via ICMP. And then you'll have a collection for all routers, and then you'll have a collection for all servers and all switches and all firewalls. And you'll have all these different collections, and whenever infrastructure management discovers a device, finds out this is a router, for example, then it's going to put it in one or more collections. It's going to put it in the I can ping it collection, I can poll it collection, and it's a router collection. Okay? So that's really all that happens on the inventory discovery side of things. Very small, very lightweight, very fast discovery process. It's meant to get through this portion very, very quickly so that we can move on to the rest of what needs to happen. Okay? The next piece that's going to happen is over on the component discovery and polling, we have something called the monitoring profile. Now, the monitoring profile specifies what metrics to collect. Okay, so for example, there is a all routers monitoring profile, and that router monitoring profile says I want to collect interface statistics, and I want to collect Cisco CPU information, and I want to collect Cisco backplane and IPSLA and CBQoS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these different metrics that we want to collect for those devices. And then what happens is we tie that monitoring profile to a collection. So by default, out of the box, you're going to have a routers monitoring profile that's tied to the all routers collection. So once your discovery profile figures out that it is a router, it's going to put it in the all routers collections, and then the monitoring profile that's associated with that collection will pick that device up and start trying to discover all of the elements on that device that match the metrics requested in the monitoring profile. So the monitoring profile says I want Cisco CPU and interface statistics. Let's simplify it. Okay, as soon as the router shows up in the all routers collection, then component discovery and polling will kick off and try to contact the device to get all of the interfaces that are on that device and to get all the CPU elements that are on that device. And once it has discovered those components, then it's going to start polling those according to the poll rate that's specified in the monitoring profile. Okay, so that's high level. Now let's get a little bit more in detail. So give me some more space here. And now, for the discovery profile, there's various different ways that you can add devices to a discovery profile. Remember, a discovery profile can be equated almost to a seed list or a scopes list. It's just a list of devices that you want to monitor. So as you would expect, you can, in a discovery profile, you can add IP addresses. So you can just give a list of single IP addresses. Another option is you can actually add entire IP subnets or even IP blocks. So if you wanted to add an entire Class C subnet for an entire site, for example, you can do that. Or if you wanted to add a certain block with a certain subnet mask, you can do that. And then the other thing is, in a discovery profile, you can also give a list of host names. So you can actually list out all the individual host names that you want to include in your discovery profile. Now, you don't have to have just one discovery profile. You can create as many discovery profiles as you want, which means that you can kind of organize your discovery to match your own infrastructure, right? So if you wanted to, you could create one discovery profile that has everything in it. Or if you wanted to, you could create one discovery profile for each of your regions, APAC, EMEA, North America, South America, whatever. Or if you wanted, you could actually get really granular and you could create a discovery profile for each one of your major sites, right? So say you've got 5 major data centers across the U.S., right? So you could create one discovery profile for each of those data centers to kind of keep that segmented, right? And then on top of that, you create another one that has all of your remote branch offices, right? So once you get that discovery profile set up, you kick it off to run, and infrastructure management is going to contact all those devices to try and find out how to classify those devices. Really what we're trying to figure out is what collection do we put these devices in, okay? Once we get the devices in the collection, the monitoring profile kicks off. The first thing we look at in the monitoring profile is what metrics do we want to poll, right? And this is done via configuring the metric families. Okay, a metric family is something like CPU. I don't know if you guys have run into it, but I've run into it a ton, where you're trying to poll CPU across a bunch of different network devices. You're trying to poll CPU across different OSs of servers, right? CPU is my easiest example. And if you look at the Cisco devices, they have one OID, one SNMP OID for monitoring CPU. If you look at the Riverbed devices, they have a different OID. If you look at the F5s, they have a different OID. If you look at the Juniper devices, they have a different OID. And all of these OIDs are manufacturer-specific. And it used to be that you would collect this data and it would have to go into its own table, and then you could create a report that showed your top CPU for everything, but it would be broken down by manufacturer. Here's my worst Cisco CPU. Here's my worst Riverbed CPU. Here's my worst F5 CPU. Well, with Infrastructure Management 2.0, you can actually create a metric family that takes all of the different methods or all of the different OIDs for collecting CPU and normalizes them into a metric family called DPU, right? And so you would obtain the data via this particular OID that corresponds to that device. So if it's a Cisco device, you get the Cisco CPU OID. If it's a Riverbed, you get it from the Riverbed CPU OID. You pull that data in, and the infrastructure manager puts that essentially in the same table, right? And then you can take that table and assign that to the monitoring profile, which assigns it to the collection of all routers or all network devices or whichever collection you want to do, right? So that is done via vendor certifications, right? And this is something that we haven't had before, at least on the NetVoyant side. As a vendor certification is that information that ties the MIB to the metric family, or the OID in the MIB specifically, or OIDs, into the metric family. So for CPU, I may have 5 different vendor certifications: Cisco vendor certification, Riverbed, F5, Juniper, Nortel, whatever I may have all those different vendor certifications. And the nice thing is Infrastructure Manager draws a curtain and says, you know what? The user doesn't need to know which OID it comes from. All the user wants to know is what is the CPU utilization. So that's where it puts it into the metric families and kind of puts it all together for us, puts it all in one place where we can assign one normalized metric family into a monitoring profile. Okay? Now, the only other thing that you really need to know about is event rules, right? And you may have been wondering, okay, well, how do we set up notifications? Well, event rules are also tied to monitoring profiles. Because if you think about your monitoring profiles, you're going to have one monitoring profile for your servers, one for your virtual servers, one for your ESX hosts, one for your routers, one for your switches, and so if you think about it, most of the time your notifications or your thresholds need to be assigned along the same lines that your monitoring profiles are broken up, right? So if all of your servers are going to need a threshold for this amount or this value, whatever it is. That's where the event rules come in. So for an event rule, you're going to go in and assign, I want CPU to be less than 80%. If it goes above 80%, then raise an event. Infrastructure Management 2.0 raises events and synchronizes those up to the Event Manager component inside CA Performance Center. Right? So if you've used NPC to do your notifications before, it's not going to be that much different because it's really just treating it as an event from a different data source. You've got now your Infrastructure Manager data source that's now feeding events up into Event Manager, and then you set up your notifications to correlate and look for various different filters that you've got set up, and you email those out or you send traps or whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, and those events, if you've got CA Performance Center tied to Spectrum, you can also correlate those events into Spectrum and do that there. All right, so that was actually, I didn't want to take up too much time because I wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions. So that's my Infrastructure Manager 2.0 crash course. So Laurel, if you'd like, go ahead and open up the questions. We've also got questions in the question and answer session. There was one question for the slides for download. If you were in the live meeting, if you look at the status bar in the bottom right-hand corner, you can hit that little print icon, and that will print these slides to PDF for you. We're also going to be posting this meeting is being recorded, and we're going to be posting it to YouTube hopefully by tomorrow. Okay, Laurel, if you would open up the lines.
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I will pause just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. And once again, in order to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad.
Okay, we had a question in the Q&A on live meeting. Jackie says, monitoring profile must specify metrics in order to monitor in order for that specific to be monitored. Example, must you specify CPU in order for IM 2.0 to collect data on CPU? Yes, so you do have to have let me get back here. You do have to have a metric family assigned to the monitoring profile in order to actually collect CPU information. I think that was your question, Jackie. So if you do want to collect CPU or interface statistics or whatever it is, then the monitoring profile has to specify that. Now, CA has done a lot of the work for us, and they've built some out-of-the-box metric families, vendor certifications, monitoring profiles, and collections for us. So by default, a lot of that stuff is covered. And we're working in the community. We're working with in the beta community. We're working with Oleg and the other project managers, product managers, to make sure that if there are other certifications that are needed out of the box, that we can get that taken care of. Susan asked, can you create your own metric family for things like VIPs, et cetera, that are normally not supported out of the box with eHealth and NetVoyant? Yes, you can. You can create your own metric family. You can create your own vendor certifications, and you can assign those metric families to monitoring profiles. So if you have VIPs, or if you have, my best example for a non-standard option is an air conditioner with temperature probes. Right? It's not something that normally comes out of the box. So if you have an air conditioner with temperature probes and you want to be able to pull that via SNMP, you can build a vendor certification, build a metric family, and call it environmental temperature or something like that, and assign that to a monitoring profile that's assigned to a collection. Absolutely. Okay, are there any audio questions? Okay, Sam has a question. There's a discussion on our internal distribution list about the minimum resources to install IM 2.0. Could you please give us some comment about it? I'm actually a little bit upset about the resource requirements on Infrastructure Manager 2.0. Let me get back to my slide there. Here we go. So the minimum requirements in order to get it up and running, the main constraint is the RAM. Certain processes do crash if you don't have the recommended amount of RAM. I know there are some users out on the community that are trying to do with less. I myself have installed Performance Center with 1 gig of RAM, it doesn't work that well because Performance Center is web-based, and web-based applications always require RAM. Data collector, data aggregator, and data repository, I've installed them with 4 gigs of RAM each and gotten it to work. However, as soon as I got, I think, above 4 or 5 devices, it started having problems and services started crashing. So minimum resources to install IAM 2.0. Unfortunately, right now, what CA is telling us is that these are the numbers you're going to have to go with, and if you do anything less than this, you run the risk of crashing the services or the processes on the server. Okay, Michael has a question. How do you make changes to the desired metrics to specific devices, not part of the group? So if you have, then you have, let's say, 100 devices, and 2 of those devices you want to change which metrics you want to pull. So for 98 of the devices, you want to pull CPU and interfaces, but for 2 of those devices, you only want to pull interfaces. Right now, what you would have to do is actually create 2 different collections and 2 different monitoring profiles. It's the only way to do it, because the monitoring profile specifies everything about the metrics, and then the monitoring profile is assigned to the collection. So anything that's in the collection is going to follow the rules of the monitoring profile. So you would have to get those 2 devices out into their own collection, and then you would have to create a custom monitoring profile that excludes the metrics that you don't want to monitor or has the changes to the metrics that you want to make, and then assign that to that collection. Okay, Lute has a question. Is trap-based discovery supported? Device sends a trap. If device is not in the system, it is added currently in Spectrum. As far as I know, it is not currently supported. I do not know if it's on the roadmap. That would be a really good discussion to have over on the beta community. So if you're interested in that, there is, if you go to our message boards and look at the Infrastructure Manager category, the very first sticky up there at the top will be instructions on how to join the beta community so that we can get something like that in. That would be a great way to do it. Definitely a good feature in Spectrum that should be carried over to IAM 2.0. For Infrastructure Manager 2.0, can all the servers be virtual? If not, which ones must be physical? As far as I know, there are no restrictions on what can be physical and what can be virtual. So they can all be virtual if needed. I don't see any requirements that any be physical. However, the data repository system, I mean, it's a database server just like any other, and as with all database servers, they're going to work better in a physical environment rather than a virtual environment, depending on your virtual environment. Okay. Any audio questions?
Well, did we have any questions on the phone lines?
I think Lorella's out. We've got another question in the meantime. Dave says, we have a lot of groups in eHealth today. Do you know how much modification or additional info I'll need to transfer that into IAM 2.0? So IAM 2.0 supports RESTful web services, or a lot of the functionality in IAM 2.0 is accomplished via RESTful web services, and there's a course that's going to be coming out, I believe, at the end of January, maybe February, that CA Education is offering on how to use those RESTful web services. So one of the big features that I was pushing for during the beta was that NPC had a SOAP web service where you could build an XML describing your group structure, including all of the members of all of the groups, and import that XML into NPC, and it would create or modify your groups. That same functionality exists in CA Performance Center. The only real caveat is that now, instead of using SOAP, they use the more efficient RESTful web services, which is great. It just makes it a little bit of a learning curve for those of us who know how to use SOAP and are still trying, like myself, still trying to learn how to use RESTful web services. So I don't know. I'm not an eHealth expert, but I don't know what it would take to get those groups out into some kind of XML from eHealth. But once you have that into the format required for the RESTful web service to import that into CA Performance Center, you can take that group and import that in using the RESTful web service. It's actually something that I've been working on. I've got a post on my blog, stuart.weenig.com, that talks about how to do it in NPC. And once I figure out and script a way to do it in CA Performance Center, I'll put my tool out there so that other people can use it. Michael, we had another question. Can devices be added manually, or is discovery profiles mandatory? Yes and yes. Discovery profiles are mandatory, and devices can be added manually. But the thing is, adding a device to Infrastructure Manager 2.0 is adding it to a discovery profile. So you can either add it to an existing discovery profile or to a separate discovery profile. Really, the only reason you would have, a separation of discovery profiles is to try and keep your discovery profiles organized. But yeah, adding a device into Infrastructure Manager 2.0 is the process of adding it to a discovery profile. So yes, they are mandatory. If you want to simplify things and not have to worry about which discovery profile to add it to, then just have one discovery profile that has everything that you want to discover inside that profile. Let's see, the next one we had. The browser view is available in NPC. Will it be available for reports in infrastructure management? I hope so. If it's not, it's going to be a big problem. There is an idea on the backlog for CA Performance Center 2.0 to have the browser view available. In the current version of CA Performance Center, it's not available. So it's not something that you can use today. Hopefully in the future they'll enable that. Can I briefly describe the integration between Spectrum and IAM 2.0? I actually can't, mainly because I'm not a Spectrum guy, so when people start talking Spectrum, I kind of tune it out. As far as I know, the main integration between IAM 2.0 and Spectrum is to port the events from IAM 2.0, or actually from CA Performance Center Event Manager service, over to Spectrum, so that Spectrum can kind of be a front end for that. So if you'd like more about that, I'm sure you could post a question on the message boards asking Oleg to describe that, or to point in the right direction, some more information on that. And if you don't get any traction, we can, as community leaders, we can get them to get that information for us. Okay, Klaus had a
lot of integration with Spectrum right now.
Sorry, Michael, I didn't understand you.
In general, there's not a lot of integration between Spectrum and IAM 2.0 right now. You can use it in as a data source in CAPC, as far as I know, but there's not a lot of integration of events and everything. You can just shoot events to Spectrum, but it's mostly one way.
Yeah, that was the impression that I got. It's mostly one-way events from Event Manager over to Spectrum. Klaus had a question. Where can we get the full list of supported devices? Well, actually, the list of supported devices is infinite, because you can technically build your own vendor certifications. So I assume you're meaning supported devices out of the box. That is a very good question. I don't have that list. Oleg may have that list, and we might be able to get that from him. I'll take that down as an action item to try and see if he can give us a good answer on the supported devices list. But really, it's going to depend more on what metrics and MIBs we've got built into Infrastructure Manager, as opposed to what devices are supported. And CA might not be able to give us a good answer for that. Jeremy asked, the Spectrum integration allows Spectrum known devices to be imported for discovery in Infrastructure Manager 2.0. Okay, so Jeremy Newberry, thank you, Jeremy, for answering that question. Apparently, if you add Spectrum to CA Performance Center, it will allow Spectrum devices to be added to discovery in IAM 2.0. Great. Fred, what is the roadmap plan for Spectrum integration? That I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. So probably a question for the beta community directed towards Oleg, I would say. Steve, how long will it last to create an own vendor cert? I assume you mean how long will it take to create a vendor cert? It's actually pretty easy. Once you get the process down, you can do it in under 20 minutes or so. It really just depends on you knowing the MIB and knowing what OIDs you want to pull in, and then mapping those OIDs to the metric family fields. So it's not too bad there. Let's see, I wanted to go back here. How does SOI fit into the architecture? It's a very good question. I'm sure marketing would have a good answer for that. I don't. SOI, I've been told that SOI is going to use Data Performance Center as its reporting engine, which I haven't yet seen. So as far as I can tell, SOI is not quite there ready yet to integrate into Performance Center. I know you can't add it as a data source yet, so it doesn't really fit in here. Sue, when determining deployment size, small, medium, or large, let's say you have 1,000 routers, is that the count, or do you need to count all the variables you want to monitor? The latter. You would count all the variables you want to monitor, all the components you'll want to monitor. So when we talk about sizing, we're talking about 100,000 elements or 100,000 components to 500,000 components or 1 million components. If you have a switch that has 2 interfaces and that's all it has, then that's going to be like 2. If you have a 6500 that's got hundreds of interfaces, then that's going to be hundreds of components, even though it's only one device. So it's equivalent to the elements in eHealth or the poll instance count in NetVoyant. All right, let's see here. Tarun, I am installing NFA on Windows Server 2008 R2. Can I install Performance Center 2.0 on the same Windows machine? No, you cannot. CA Performance Center 2.0 is Linux only. You cannot support it on Windows. I suppose if you wanted to run it in a hypervisor on that same box, you probably could. That'd be a possible way. I don't know if it'd be very efficient. Looks like browser view is currently planned. Have posted this idea, and I see the current status as currently planned. Awesome. So it looks like the browser view is currently planned. Hopefully they'll be able to implement that pretty soon. Thank you, Prasad. Fred, eHealth has a sizing tool. Will this be available for IM 2.0? That's a good question. We probably need to ask the sales guys if they have a sizing tool. I think Oleg did send out a sizing spreadsheet. I would check in the infrastructure manager category in the message boards. I think there was a spreadsheet posted or a link to a spreadsheet posted where you could go in and you could size things to what you were looking for. Okay, are there any audio questions, Laurel?
There are no questions at this time. There are no questions
okay.
at this time.
Great, thanks, Laurel. I don't see any other questions in the live meeting, so if you would please take a moment to fill out our survey. And Michael, back to you.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, like Stuart said, please rate the webcast for today. Next month, our last one for this year, we will have Kevin Davis, and he will go into details on advanced networking diagnostics. It will be a really interesting presentation, especially if you have a technical background. He goes really well into details. And with that, I would like to thank everyone. Just one last note, if you are planning to visit CA World, once again, make sure you use the link on the community webpage to register for the $200 extra discount for the community. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day.